Welcome to the KidMin Podcast with Dr. Val and Dr. Virginia, where we talk about everything KidMin.
And pull back the curtain on some of the surprises and challenges in children's ministry that nobody prepares you for.
I'm Dr. Val, and together we have over 45 years of experience in children's ministry.
I'm Dr. Virginia. Valerie and I met over 10 years ago in our doctoral program at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. We are excited to share with you all the great stuff that we have picked up over the years. We want to minister to you, the children's minister.
Welcome, friends. Thank you so much for joining us today. Dr. Virginia and I are excited to be talking about learning styles again. It is one of my favorite topics. It has been for a really long time. And we hope that this information is just helpful and practical. How are you doing today, Dr. Virginia?
Good. How are you, Dr. Val?
I am still very stressed out from a dream that I had last night. I am a vivid dreamer typically, and so I often wake up remembering my dreams. And I had the most terrible dream last night that my husband and I were visiting a new church for some reason. And it was a big, huge, gigantic, like mega church, huge building with like thousands of people running around in it. And for some reason, when we walk in the door, they just hand me a bag and they tell me that I'm supposed to be teaching in a classroom. And so I go running to try to find the classroom, which I can't find because I've never been to this building before. And so I'm running around trying to figure out where I'm supposed to go. And I walk into a room of like 50 or 60 kids that are just all over the place. And I have this bag and I'm supposed to be teaching from it. And I don't have any of the materials. And so I'm trying to find things and do things. And I literally just woke up in a panic thinking that had happened, that I was not ready for something that I was supposed to be ready for, even though I wasn't supposed to be there.
You're a first-time guest.
So I just am wondering, how old are you before the I'm not prepared for school dreams happen? Not happening? Because it's that same feeling of, like being in front of a group of people and not knowing what you're supposed to be doing, or not knowing and you just panic and you don't know where you are. And and people were like, the other adults were very like frustrated with me that I wasn't prepared and that I didn't know what I was supposed to do and that I didn't know where I was supposed to go. And I kept saying, but this is my first time here. So
I know. I mean, I guess that's one
very stressful. I started off
very stressed out. I guess that's one way to do like a new visitor bag. Oh, you're a new visitor. Here's a bag. Go teach a class. So
you're here. We need you in preschool. I definitely feel like that, because I can remember at some point during the dream, like at some point when I'm running around thinking, I really need to talk to somebody about how they treat visitors. Like I had that actual thought in my mind.
That thought's going,
It's like, this is not what you're supposed to do. So I can even remember at one point I was telling this lady, you really don't have good signage for people who don't know where they're going. Like, I mean, I was literally...
Oh my gosh.
So
yes, you're dreaming about signage. Yep.
So, oh goodness. So hopefully nobody else is going to be that unprepared as they're going into classrooms this week. But yes, I'm still feeling very stressed out from that. Well, hopefully our information today is going to be helpful. We are continuing our series on learning styles. And for those of you who maybe didn't catch an earlier episode that we've done about them, Dr. Howard Gardner wrote a book on multiple intelligences many years ago. And I can remember the first time I read it was when I was getting my undergraduate at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. We also read it during our doctoral program, and I did a presentation on it there. And so it's always been something that I have found great interest in. It's something that I used in my classroom when I was a classroom teacher, and I brought it in to the church setting when I was serving in children's ministry, because I do feel like it is not only incredibly helpful for teachers as they are planning, but I think that we are best serving our kids when we find lots of different ways that we can help them process and learn. And so basically what Dr. Gardner's theory is that everything worth learning can be taught in different ways. And we are all uniquely created to learn in certain ways. And that doesn't mean that you only have one way of learning. It means that you have a way that you probably prefer to learn, the way that your brain processes the best. And so many times when we are going over learning styles with leaders, they'll say, well, wait, I feel like I'm both visual and kinesthetic. And you can be, because we can learn from all of the ways in some ways. But we are going to have one particular one that we tend to lean towards or prefer. And so not only does this help us find new ways to help kids process and learn, but it also gives us opportunities to find some unique and different things that we can do in the classroom to keep the kids engaged and to keep doing different things so that we're not just teaching in the same way. Because we do have a habit of tending to teach in the way that we prefer to learn. And so we have to kind of keep that in mind, that we want to reach all of our kids when we're teaching. So we want to give them the opportunity to learn in the best possible way that they can.
We also tend to teach in the way that we were taught. So even if something maybe isn't necessarily our learning style, we tend to just teach what's been modeled to us. And so oftentimes that can be sort of like a lecture format, a very, teacher-centered, instructional, talking to students format.
Right.
And for most kids, that's not going to be the most effective way to teach them. One with, whenever we think about attention spans, wanting to teach with kids' attention spans, having different breaks, different activities, different ways to reset attention spans. And then also thinking about the variety of different ways that people learn. Just because remind me, how many of Howard Gardner's learning styles are there?
Well, we're basically focusing on 8.
8.
He had added and subtracted and redid some things over the years.
A little bit of calculus to that.
But we have kind of zoned in on the basic 8. Yeah.
But if you're focusing on just like a lecture format or a lecture style, or you standing up and talking to students, at best, you're hitting 1/8 of those students in their preferred learning style at best. And bringing in a variety of different activities, you're going to be hitting kids' other, primary learning style, their secondary learning style. And so it's just going to help reinforce and teach the lesson in so many different ways.
Right. Well, and we talk about the 8, and we've listed them before, and I'll list them here again just very quickly. So for those who maybe haven't caught some of the earlier ones, there are visual learners that learn through sight, through what they see. There are kinesthetic learners, which are learners that learn through movement. We have auditory learners that enjoy music and beat. There are verbal learners that tend to learn through words and speaking. There are logical learners who are very mathematical, very logical in the way that they process information. There are relational learners, and these are the learners that learn best from others or talking with others. They need those relationships to be able to learn. And then on the opposite end of that, we have reflective learners, and these are the learners that learn best when they can process on their own, and they have the quiet and the opportunity to be able to process. And then we have the one that we are talking about today, natural learners. And these are students that learn better when they are in nature. And so what we're going to do today is really just talk about how we can have some opportunities to create specific activities in the classroom to help natural learners process and learn information better. And I'm going to admit from the very top here that the natural learning style is one of the ones that I struggle with the most. And I think the reason why is because I do tend to like order and and process, and I do find that nature does tend to be more unpredictable. You can't plan around nature as well. You can't control nature. So that's probably one of my control issue kind of situations going there. But also because my brain so processes with kids' safety and security, there are so many things about natural learning that do kind of fall into that realm of, are we sure we're being safe? Are we as secure as we possibly can be? And we'll talk about that as we're going through this. And so I think that it's just my my natural thought process is, it's more complicated. It's more unpredictable. We have to be more careful. And so I do think that when we are planning activities for natural learners, we do need to be more cautious and more aware of our surroundings and more aware of our students. But we're going to talk about that as we go along. I think you enjoy natural learning probably more than I do.
Yes. So I don't know if I'm a natural learner. I don't know if I've had enough opportunity to figure out if I'm a natural learner or not, but I definitely enjoy being in nature. Going for walks on nature trails is one of my ways to de-stress. One of my ways, I'm definitely a very reflective learner. And so just like walking on a nature trail, walking out in the woods, in the trees, and reflecting and thinking, like that's my best way to think and to process.
Right.
And so I definitely enjoy that. And I do, like trying to plan activities, for our kids that get them out in nature or get them, involved or touching or doing, natural things. And, and as we were talking about maybe some hesitations and some challenges, I was just thinking too that, one of the things, it's hard. It definitely does take a lot more planning for nature activities.
Yes.
Just on the practical level, because I'm sitting here thinking, about on Sunday mornings, what do our kids wear? And not all churches are like this, but a lot of kids and families are still wearing their Sunday best to church.
Right.
They're wearing their pretty dresses and their nice church shoes that they only wear on Sunday. And so, you can't be like, okay, guys, we're going to go down to like the mud pit behind the parking lot and have a nature activity in the big mud puddle.
Yes.
And so it definitely takes a lot of intentionality, but it's not unovercomable.
Right.
Even if you want to do an activity in the mud pit, you just got to tell parents for like a month ahead of time.
You really
tell them
do.
to bring a change of clothes.
Well, and you need to have the supplies ready to be able to do those things too. You do need to have maybe some, like a lot of times I would have like large adult t-shirts that I could put over a child's dress or have smocks or, aprons and things like that so that you are prepared for those kind of messier activities. But I definitely do. And that was one of the suggestions that I'll have when we talk a little bit more is on how you can be prepared, but also how you can notify parents, because that's an important thing for us to be able to do.
Yes.
All right, let's jump in by talking about some of the characteristics of kids that are natural learners. Obviously, they are the kids that do enjoy being in nature. They're the ones that always want to go outside. They're the ones that enjoy outside play. They're the ones that are constantly asking, when are we going to the playground? When are we going outside? Because they do want to be outside. They are very aware of God's creation and they can readily identify things in nature. These are the kids that talk about bugs and different kinds of bugs and spiders and birds and, all sorts of kinds of animals. They're the ones that are very familiar with flowers and plants and trees and just kind of are able to identify those things that are out in nature. They enjoy caring for plants and animals. So they are going to enjoy, taking care. They're, when you do those activities where you are working with plants or when you're working, talking about animals, they're going to get a little bit more engaged. They're going to enjoy that more. They're going to talk about things that they've done at home. They're going to talk about the animals that they have at home, or they're going to talk about friends' pets, or, they're going to really be engaged in telling the stories. I can always tell those kids too, because they're always talking about like Shark Week on, they're the ones that are like super into watching the animal conservation things on television and things about safaris and all of that kind of stuff. So they really enjoy learning about animals and finding more out about them. They like to collect items. They tend to be collectors, and they will, like I said, want to be outside. They're going to be the ones that want to pick up all the rocks and want to pick up all the sticks and want to pick up everything when you do go out to the playground. And the great thing about it is that objects from nature are great learning opportunities for spiritual growth. It's a great chance for kids to learn about God and what He created and all the wonders of nature, and being able to bring in the things that the Bible talks about when it's referring to nature and creation and any kind of outside that you can bring into the classroom during those lessons are going to be incredibly helpful. So what we thought we would do is just talk a little bit about some things that you can do in the classroom to integrate the natural learning style into some of your activities that you already have in place.
So there's lots of ways to bring natural learning into the classroom. We'll also talk about ways to go out and get into nature, so you can do it both ways. One of the things that we were thinking about and talking about are things like sensory bins, or like water play with water bins, different ways of bringing either those natural items into a sensory bin with like rice or some other element in there, or playing with water. I'll never forget, there was a particular activity we did. This was years and years ago. But it was about Jesus calming the storm. And we had like a sensory bin, like water. It was a water table. That's what I need to call it, a water table on wheels with a little spout. So it's like you can fill it up, roll it where you need to. And then when you're done, you open up the spout and just let all the water out. It was nice. Right. And not that you have to have one of those, but it just made it easier.
It does.
And we had we had tinfoil for all the kids to make little boats. Right. And we pulled all these just random items out of our supply closet, and they were putting, golf balls and ping pong balls and buttons and different things in their little boats and trying to see how much they could put in their boat and have it still float, or, and so it was just such a fun hands-on thing. Kids don't often get to play in water like that, definitely not at church.
Right.
And so it's a special, neat thing for them to be able to play in water, or have a sensory bin where you've got, nature items related to your Bible story in there. And so those are great also for our tactile kinesthetic learners. And so there's so many different ways we can pull that in those activities.
Right. I love doing water play in the classroom. And again, it's one of those things you really have to prep for. You want to make sure you have towels in the room. You want to make sure that you put like a tarp down before you put, whether you have your water table, or even if you just have, because I was never lucky enough to have a water table. So usually I just used very large plastic bins.
Yeah.
They have them in all sorts of different depths and widths where you could just bring them in, and I would just fill with water and set them on the tarp and have the towels and things ready and do all the things that you talked about. I love doing will it float games with the kids. Like, okay, here is an item. Do you think this will float? Do you think, and trying to find interesting items that will float that you wouldn't think they would, or that won't float, if like just to try to trick them up a little bit. But for the older kids, they have a lot of fun, like guessing and letting them put things in the water and being able to do that. So I am really big on that. I talked about safety and security. The things that you do need to think about are the age level of your kids, and also the amount of water that you have in the bin or in the room, because again, accidents can happen really quickly. So you want to be very mindful of that and make sure you have enough leaders in the classroom to help monitor those things. And again, a lot of times for the preschool ages, I tend to do those things in rotation, where there's one teacher that is there and we only send a couple of kids at a time to do that while the other kids are doing other things, so that you don't have too many kids in the area that you can't kind of control.
Yeah.
But I like doing the water play even with infants and smaller kids. And I tended to do that with bottles. I would do the bottles. You can use the goo off to get, the labels off the bottles. And then I would fill it with water and put a little bit of food coloring in there just to make it a little bit more intense, a little brighter. And then put items, very small items in that went along with what the Bible story was about, so that the babies could sit and hold the water bottle and look at the items that are floating in the water and moving it. And again, I would hot glue the bottle cap, and then I would put tape over it as well, so that I made sure that I kept it very secure. But I also did that I would fill them with sand and put little items in it, or fill it with rice and put little items in them so that they could shake them and find the items that were hidden, kind of to do a little. And that way I could bring those elements into the classroom with younger children that really weren't old enough to be able to do some of the things that I would like to do with them. And so, so again, it's finding those kind of unique ways. And that's another thing, that even if you have you can put flowers and leaves and things into those bottles and seal them up so that they can look at them. So it doesn't have to be just water, but it can be all sorts of different things from nature that you can have sealed and contained in a bottle so that the kids can take a look at it and see it, but not necessarily have direct access to it if they're not old enough. Another one of my favorite nature things to do is a prayer walk outside. And again, this is something that I know can be really difficult for a lot of churches, and it may not work for your particular situation. You want to make sure that you do have a very safe area outside that you're going to take the kids, something that is, fenced in, or something that's very contained, so that you are not, too close to the road or too close to traffic in the parking lot, that kind of thing. So you do want to make sure you have a space that is adequate for that. But to be able to take the kids outside and have them see things that are in nature, and then take a moment and stop and pray and thank God for what he provided. Thank God for the trees. Thank God for the birds. And literally just do a walk. And then when somebody sees something, they can stop the group, and you can all stop, and they can point out what they see. And then you can take a moment to thank God for it and talk a little bit about it. And especially if it's something that can tie into the lesson that you have, but this would work for any of the lessons on just thanking God and prayer and, just God's creation and those kinds of things. It welds really well into a lot of different Bible stories that we'll have for a lesson. But also, even with older kids, to give them a little notebook and let them go outside, and they can either draw pictures and then write a prayer, or, be able to just sit outside and just journal for a few minutes and think about what they want to thank God for. But getting them outside in nature and just having that quiet and letting them just kind of find a spot to sit. I think it's a great time to even if you have a good location to be able to do it with older kids, just take them outside for the first few minutes and let them bring their Bibles and just read the passage that you're going to be studying that day, and just sit outside for just a minute and read, and then take them back inside. So you're getting them out. They're getting a moment of quiet, a little peace and quiet in God's nature. And then they're looking at the scripture on their own. And so it's those kinds of moments that we can provide to help kids just focus a little bit more on what it means to have devotion time, to have a quiet time, but also to help them in a guided prayer situation. So I think nature can really help with that.
And that's walking around outside is one of my favorite activities to do. One, it's very low prep, zero prep. You just got to think about it. And two, you also can tie it in to a bunch of different stories. We did it most recently with Paul's different journeys. It's like, okay, we're learning about Paul's first journey, Paul's second journey. And so going on and taking groups of kids on walks around our campus and talking about how, Paul didn't have a car. He most likely walked wherever he went, or he may have had like a donkey or a horse or something else to ride on, but it was going to take him a long time to go through all of his journeys and travel where he's going. And, you can do that for, marching around Jericho, and you can go march around the church. You can, the Israelites wandering in the wilderness. And so there's so many different ways to do that. Just get out and go for a walk outside. And anytime any of our groups go for a walk outside, we always send them with a walkie-talkie. And so we have a walkie-talkie at our desk. Our security team has a walkie-talkie. We have a wonderfully well-organized security team to where they're inside the building, they're outside on the parking lots. They're accessible via radio. We're accessible via radio. And so we send that out, with our groups anytime they go out. That also includes our little ones when we will send them out on the buggy. We'll send them with a radio. And so even our little ones, our babies and our toddlers, we'll load them up in the buggy and let them go for walks around campus as well. And so whenever it's seasonable, which a lot of times it's really hot, but whenever the seasons are nice, we love to send the kids outside as much as possible.
Right. Well, and even those little guided ropes that you can use, different things that you can use for the preschoolers, for the younger kids, if that will help you feel safer and that will help them be safer. You definitely want to make sure that you have plenty of adults with you when you're doing these. And so that is something that you might ask for a Sunday for the deacons to help out with, or for, because so you want to plan these pretty well. If you don't have that very contained space that they can be in where you might need that extra help. But just with a little thought and a little bit of planning, those prayer walks can be a lot of fun. And I love doing scavenger hunts as well. So it can be one of those things where you give them a sheet of some different things, like different types of flowers, different types of leaves, different types of trees, where they can have like literally a checkoff list where they just go out and they have the list and they go and they look for something and they just check it off when they see it. Or you can just have them look for certain specific things that you've hidden. You can hide some items out in an area. And so they have a scavenger hunt where they're supposed to look for and then take notes and write down what they're seeing, when they found something or how they found something. So there's lots of different ways that you can come up with different little games and different little hunting kind of items that they can look for as they're outside that pertain to your Bible story. But also that just gives them the chance to kind of really look around where they're really noticing the area. They're really noticing the trees. They're really noticing the flowers. They're really paying attention to the things that they're seeing. And so I think scavenger hunts are a fun way to do that.
And another thing that we do periodically, probably not as often as I would like, but periodically, nature walks that are part nature walk, and then also part evacuation drill. We don't necessarily say that, but going on a nature walk, that is also an opportunity to practice if the building's on fire, if there's an emergency, this is where we go, and that way, if there ever is an emergency, we are able to say, it's just like our nature walk. We're going to go outside building. We're going to go to this point. And that's where, and then, whenever it's safe, we'll come back in. And so that's something that we haven't done in a long time, but that can be a nice way to kind of prep for that. And also get your nature walk in.
See, that's awesome. I also think that it's a lot of fun to be able to do nature rubbings when you're outside, like taking a crayon or chalk and some paper and having them find a leaf and then do a rubbing of it on the paper, having them find living things outside that you can bring inside that has to do with your Bible story can be helpful as well. And so it's finding different ways that you can have them interact with nature and bring them outside and have them, think about God's creation. That's really cool. And it's even like, and one of the things that we typically do a lot is we'll bring in the palm leaves on Palm Sunday. It's finding if there are things in your Bible story that are mentioned, if you can have them in the classroom for the kids to be able to see, that's just going to automatically add on to the amount of things that they're going to not only be learning, but remembering. I'd always mention this stat, and I need to look it up so that I can actually say it correctly. But, the percentage of what you remember is increased with every sense that you add to the learning experience. So if you see something and hear something and touch something, every sense you add to a learning experience helps with retention. And so, again, anytime we can bring in these items to show the kids, if we can, bring in a mustard seed, if we can bring in, all of these things that we're talking about in the story where they actually have a visual. I mean, if it just has to be a picture is still great, but it's the item itself can even help so much more bring a story to life. If you can have these things in place, and there are a lot of these things that you can actually already kind of keep in your storage, things that will last, that you can find so that the teachers will have them there to be able to bring things into the classroom if they have the opportunity to for the Bible story. It's really helpful.
And another way to bring the outside in is by planting seeds, particularly when we're learning about different lessons, like talking about how Jesus is the vine and we are the branches, and talking about, growing in Christ. And so, just the very simple little seeds in the windowsill or in a little plastic baggie and watching it sprout. I know my children have brought those home at various times and they've all not survived, but that's okay. That's not the point.
Well, they learn about the process. They learn about the entire cycle of life.
Yes. And so that's definitely a fun way for kids to bring that nature in. And, they love running in and checking on their seeds and seeing if their seeds are growing and seeing if they've sprouted yet, from one week to the next. And so that can be just a fun way to do that.
Right. Oh, yeah, for sure. But anytime you have the ability to be able to bring in these experiences for the kids, it's going to make the stories come more to life for them. It's going to be more exciting for them, and they're going to have the opportunity to be able to make those connections.
Well, and I think too about like you go to a live nativity and there's like a real donkey or,
Right.
Those kind of things, or you have a petting zoo and there's like a real sheep. And so those opportunities to get to see and interact with those real, live animals, which a lot of kids don't get. I mean, a lot of kids, we don't live on farms. We don't live in an agricultural society like we once did. And so, seeing a sheep or seeing a donkey is a big deal for a lot of kids.
It is. Well, and we used to do that too. I know with like Vacation Bible School, whenever it was like the rodeo theme or the Western theme, there are all sorts of like for the family days for our big parties, we would bring in horses or do pony rides or do, those kind of things. So it's finding ways that you can incorporate what you're teaching, what you're learning during a week or during a Sunday morning, and being able to bring it into the classroom to make it a little bit more alive for the kids. And I think that that's what we're trying to do, what our hope is. Again, let me kind of round back up with my safety and security, concerns and things that we need to think about. Bringing nature into the classroom or taking the kids out into nature takes planning. And like Virginia said earlier, when she was talking about letting the parents know ahead of time, anytime I know we have something like that coming up, I try to make sure the parents are very aware of it. I make sure that I do send those notes home, or I do, post that or put that on our social media or whatever however I communicate with the families at the church. Let them know ahead of time we're going to be doing a nature walk this Sunday, weather permitting. And so it gives them the opportunity to know that. I also let them know if there's for some reason that their child can't participate, to please let me know, so that if they, do have maybe severe allergies so that they can't go outside. I do tend to try to be very aware and ask parents a lot about allergies, because I tend to always have at least one parent that forgets to tell me their child is very allergic to something.
Yes.
And so even when I have them fill out paperwork, sometimes parents have forgotten to add that their kids are allergic to something. And it's not that they mean to do that in any certain way. It's just sometimes they just so used to it, they forget. And it can tend to happen because, like, I can tell you, my son-in-law is allergic to shellfish. And you would think that I would remember that. And often I will, like, sometimes they'll have to remind me, because we'll go into a restaurant and they'll say, and I was like, oh yeah, because they'll, it's just for some reason because I guess we're just so used to it. It just doesn't always come to my head. I don't know why. But so a lot of times that will happen with parents. And so I want to make sure that I remind parents often, and ask them often, are there any new allergies, anything that we need to be aware of? So I always try to make sure that parents are very aware. I also always had an allergy alert poster that was laminated on every door in the building and on the entrance to the building. And I did it laminated because I would have the write-on wipe-off pens in the classrooms, and I would usually change it up every quarter, or, according to kind of the theme or the season or whatever, however I had it kind of set up. But one of the reasons why I changed it often was so that we would always remember it, because so it didn't become so, ubiquitous.
Just part of the scenery.
That people don't notice it. But I would often have that so that we could write on there, today the kids will be tasting, touching, whatever it is that we're doing in the classroom, so that it was on the door for all the parents to see. And one of the things that I made sure that the teachers did as they greeted each child as they came in, they would verbally point it out to the parent, today we are doing this, just in case they didn't see it. But we wanted to make sure that we gave plenty of warning. And if it was going to be something that I was very concerned with, we would try to let them know the week before too, through that. Like, next week we'll be touching water, we'll be doing water play, or we'll be doing so that we are aware as much as possible of any kind of fear that a child might have, but also any kind of concern that they might have with that. One of the things that I have never done, and I often see teachers try to do this, so I always made a point of making sure that all of my teachers were very aware we never force a child to do something they don't want to do.
Yeah.
So, and I've talked a lot about I love painting, and one of the things that actually I don't think we mentioned earlier was that I like to paint with natural items as well, because I love to do stamping, I love to do rubbings, I love to do paintings because I do enjoy the art aspect of it. So like for a lot of times where we might be talking about God's creation and we might want to do a handprint, like have a child put their hand in the paint and then put it on the paper. Some children really struggle with sensory items. And so I have seen a lot of teachers say, well, I'll put their hand in the paint and put it on there because I don't want the parent to not have the item. I never want to force a child to touch something that the child doesn't want to touch, even if it's water or paint, something that we think is not a big deal.
No big deal.
It is a big deal for them if they have sensory issues or if they have fear of certain items and certain things. So, I will, if a parent ever did come to me and say, why didn't I get a handprint? I'll very quickly say, Tommy really didn't want to put his hand in the paint. And so I didn't make Tommy put his hand in the paint. I don't think a parent is ever going to be angry that they didn't get something because we didn't force their child to do something. I think that they may ask, were they left out or did they not get to participate? But to say, no, they were offered, but they chose not to. So we don't force them to do that. And so I think it's the same with going outside. I think it's the same with having items in the classroom. If there are things that a child might be afraid of, then that may be something that's not the best thing for you to do in that particular lesson. And so we want to be very mindful of that. Well, we hope this conversation has been helpful. We hope that you have maybe come up with some new ideas of things that you can do in the classroom. As always, we ask that you would like and subscribe and all the things that you would let people know about our podcast, maybe if they haven't heard of us. We just appreciate you taking time with us and spending time with us. We're very excited about all the things that we have upcoming for you in the next few weeks. If you have any questions or any thoughts of topics that you would like us to cover, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us and let us know. We would love to hear what you need so that we can meet you where you are. We just hope you have a wonderful week and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye-bye.